Delegates of conference, allow me to present the presentation to IFSW Africa Conference 2021 in Rwanda, with the theme establishing the relevance of Ubuntu in social work, a human rights perspective, by Robert Kudakwache Chigangaidze from Midlands State University and Cornelius Dudzai from Great Zimbabwe University. Delegates of conference, Ubuntu Botho or UNU, as you might all know, is guided by the axiom, a person is a person through other persons. Umuntu ngubuntu ngabantu. Ubuntu is an African philosophy which is embedded on generic life values of responsibility, justice, helpfulness, community, caring, dependability, sharing trust, love, reciprocity, equality, and social change. Ubuntu is an African worldview that brings the human face to every aspect of life, and when it is applied to social work, Ubuntu means humane social work using human methods to achieve human goals. Ubuntu is a fundamental value of social work practice in African countries such as Zimbabwe. Also, the African philosophy of Ubuntu relates to the moral qualities of a person, in particular characteristics such as gentleness, generosity, empathy, and forgiveness. Human rights are about entitlements of persons with respect to upholding of social justice. These are centered on equality, freedom, and solidarity. As human rights, they can be conceptualized as ideals, enactments, as well as being exercised. By ideals, we refer to those goals that society view as important to meet individual and community needs. As enactments, we mean that these ideals are codified into documents, usually legal instruments and constitutions. And when we say rights are exercised, we say rights are put in practice. Rights are put in action. So as Ubuntu is put in action to address human need and as well as community needs. We'll move to the human right to life, which I see as valuable in social work. Ubuntu knows that one should choose life over wealth. Essentially, at the heart of Ubuntu is survival, which is described as the ability to live and exist in spite of difficult circumstances. Solidarity through Ubuntu is what helps sustain life during climate change disasters. For example, families donating food and clothing for cyclone-inflicted communities. Among the asserted values of Ubuntu is the commandment to respect human life, and it is taboo or unheard of to spill human blood in Ubuntu. When we consider the human right to the enjoyment and highest attainable standard of health, the African philosophy of Ubuntu promotes holistic assessments in clinical social work. It appreciates the multimodal causality of diseases, which also involve environmental and spiritual causes to illness. Thus, this philosophy considers the spiritual causes of diseases. It is holistic in explaining etiology of diseases. Ubuntu promotes positive mental health through its values of connectedness, competency, consciousness, and the respect of human dignity. Again, Ubuntu promotes forgiveness, which arguably is essential in health promotion activities. They are calls to adopt the African philosophy as a framework in the fight against epidemics and pandemics such as COVID-19. In view of these arguments, one can argue that Ubuntu can help advance the realization of the highest attainable standard of health as a human right in social work practice. Human rights to safe and clean water and sanitation. The African viewpoint of Ubuntu emphasizes everyone's responsibility to the care of water as a communal resource system. From a traditional viewpoint, water is essential for domestic use and agricultural purposes. It is a source of life, food, and energy. Therefore, respecting water addresses other human rights, such as the human right to life, the human right to development as well. Water is also utilized in the African spiritual practices that involve communing with the ancestors. Hence, it is regarded as sacred. In Ubuntu, ladies and gentlemen, water can be given to a traveler or a stranger to help him cool down and as a sign of respecting human dignity. Ubuntu values the human right to adequate food and nutrition, which is a pivotal element to social work practice because it ensures elements of food security that are central to social development, social policy formulation, health, as well as prevention of diseases. Ubuntu kudla or kujga, meaning that for one to exhibit Ubuntu, the person should have eaten. It means food gives and restores human dignity. Ubuntu involves giving strangers food or travelers food and entertaining them to show respect of their human dignity. Food generosity values are central to the philosophy of Ubuntu. Ubuntu promotes food production activities such as Nimbe, Zunderamambo in Zimbabwe, Letsema in South Africa, that ensure food security in times of droughts and other climate change related disasters. Social work is well known for intervening in those particular areas where there are interactions within systems, interactions between people to enhance well-being. Social work can also intervene in food production services where systems interrelate for the enhancement of the welfare of humanity. Delegates of conference, the human right to safe, clean, and sustainable environment is an essential element to the African philosophy of Ubuntu. Why? The environment is seen as the habitat of God and our ancestors. Hence, it has to be protected. Ubuntu can help advance eco-spiritual social work. For those of you who have listened and we have read the work of Van Breda, it speaks volumes in terms of how Ubuntu advances eco-spiritual social work. Ubuntu provides a theoretical framework for environmental sustainability through the concepts of ukama, relatedness, taboos, and totems. Again, in Ubuntu, the custom is to leave the environment for future generations in a more improved state than a deteriorated one. The environment is an important element in social work practice because it is a source of life, a source of energy, a source of rejuvenation, a source of the enhancement of welfare. Thus, it is pivotal to address such a human entitlement within the profession of social work. And Ubuntu provides the philosophical background through which we can attain knowledge in this advancement. It will be injustice not to address the human right to development. Ubuntu promotes social development in that it connects us to the unborn generation and our responsibility to ensure that they have good well-being. Ubuntu advances notions of eradicating poverty through the values of peace, community building, dialogue, collective responsibility, and human rights. Ubuntu can be used as a concept of working with people to co-produce social development. All the human rights discussed in this presentation are essential elements to the human right of development. One, we need to respect the human life so as to ensure that there is preservation of life for there to be development. Ubuntu have proven to be essential in advancing the human right to life. So in the same manner, it has also proved to be vital in addressing the human right to sustainable environment. Again, Ubuntu has proven essential in addressing the human right to the highest attainable standard of health, to mention but a few. Thus, all these human rights are pivotal in social work, and one can argue that Ubuntu is knowledgeable, provides indigenous knowledge systems on how we can address human rights through social work practice. Delegates of this conference, as we conclude, it is important that we note that human rights are secondary to Ubuntu, but human dignity is primary. Human dignity is at the epicenter of social work, Ubuntu, and human rights. Again, Ubuntu and human rights are also values of social work practice. Ubuntu as an African philosophy promotes human rights in the same manner that human rights also promote the spirit of Ubuntu. The view of respecting life in its totality, including the spirituality of life and the human dignity through enhancing food security, development, environmental sustainability, health, and access to water is inherent in Ubuntu. Social workers can tap into this African worldview in promoting human rights. The philosophy is applicable in several entitlements beyond those in this presentation. As we conclude, let us also know that Ubuntu is not only limited to human rights, but Ubuntu can expand its knowledge system to address the rights of nature, the rights of the Mother Earth, the rights of environment, that which is central also to the issues that social work can address beyond this scope. Thank you.